Good evening, everybody. We'll just wait a few minutes for others to join in. Thank you, everybody who's joined on time, but we do have some stragglers who will join in a few minutes, so let's just wait for them.
Hey, hi, Devika.
Devika, you're mute.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know who said hi, but good evening. I think let's start. It's being recorded in any case, so those who come in late can watch the recording, I guess. Yeah. Okay, good evening, everybody, to this evening's panel discussion. I just spend a couple of minutes telling those of you who are new to NHRD's Mind Matters sessions, what we do and who we are. The National HRD Network, as you know, is a professional network. It's an association of HR professionals, and it's a national organization, not for profit. It's a learning organization for HR professionals. In 2020, we started, a group of us within NHRD started Mind Matters, basically to try and understand mental health challenges, amongst people, and try and normalize conversations in mental health, really, around mental health. So because people, there was so much of stigma around just talking about any mental health issues that we said the more we talk about it, the hopefully the more people will be willing to share vulnerabilities and thereby minimize anxieties and low moods. Also for us to understand the difference between normal human emotions and illness. So these are differentiations that one needs to have as lay people. We're hoping to bring those out in these conversations. See? Just wanted to give a couple of caveats, really. Yeah. So I'd like to acknowledge that in our audience, we'll have some of us here would have had lived experience or have loved ones perhaps who have experienced suicidal thoughts and self-harm. Today's discussion would contain material that might be difficult to discuss since it explores suicide and self-harm, which some of you might find distressing. Yeah, so I request you then, if you think that you would find it distressing, be prepared to step away and use a coping mechanism, a positive coping mechanism like a breathing technique or something, or not attend at all if you are in a sensitive, frame of mind at the moment. Yeah. Let me just share my colleagues who are on the panel today. Yeah, the spotlight. Yeah. So I have with us today Nishmin Marshall. Yeah, who's I thank you, Nishmin, for joining us. Today, Nishmin is a mental health practitioner and she's been in this field for about 16 years, I think, Nishmin.
Yes.
Used to be director of SAT Suicide Prevention Center, which is really the capacity in which she's here today. She's currently volunteering at SAT as well. She's been a counselor, social worker at the BM Institute for Mental Health based out of Ahmedabad. She spent much of the last 20 years in a counseling role for students, faculty, staff, at Kalra, which is a delayed development center as well. Yeah. So thank you, Nishmin, for being with us today and sharing your experiences with us and helping us to understand what could drive people to hurt themselves, harm themselves, or even to think about ending lives. Yeah.
Thank you for having
Thank you for being with us. And we have with us also Rohit Vishal Gupta from Wipro. And Rohit, thank you so much for agreeing to be with us. Rohit is the Global Vice President of Strategy and Leadership Development at Wipro. He comes to us with about 20 plus years of experience. Yeah, half of which has been with ITC, and then with GE, and now with Wipro. So with that rich corporate experience, we are hoping, Rohit, that you will be able to bring to us some aspects of, how does this look in the corporate world? How does it impact the workplace, and what can the workplace do about it as well? Yeah, these are the things that we look to you to bring to the table, as well as any personal stories that you might have. Yeah.
Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here on this forum. Thank you, Devika.
Thank you. My background is I've had about 30 years in HR. I moved to mental health about 7 or 8 years ago. I'm an instructor with Mental Health First Aid India and a lay counselor as well. Core team member of Mind Matters. So jumping into this topic today, yeah. I would like the audience, please, to stay on mute during today's session. Please do use the chat function for any questions that you may have. Our team will pick up the questions and feed them to us at the end. We will keep about 10 minutes at the end of the program, end of the session to field questions. But if there's something that comes up in between, then we might just take it up if it is relevant to that part of the session. All right. So this topic, suicide and self-harm, I think all of us are impacted by it, right? But because we don't talk about it, we don't understand much about it. And as with all stigma, that contributes to the stigma. The only way to reduce it is to educate ourselves a little more about, what causes these feelings, emotions, what can be hurting so much that we don't want to live anymore. Yeah, what we would like to understand a little better is perhaps what makes us feel that way, and maybe what can we do about it as well. Yeah. So I'll start with a couple of questions to Nishmin first. Nishmin, can you, from your experience and education, can you tell us a little bit about how does the biology of this work and the psychology of it also? So how do we differentiate between an emotional disorder or an illness and normal lows that people go through, right? So that's one part of it that I would like you to touch upon. And from the self-injury point of view, I understand that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I understand that self-injury is basically a negative coping, and that it's demonstrated by people who are in distress. And
Correct.
people who engage in this, and this is called non-suicidal self-injury, technically, from what I understand.
Yes, yes.
And people who engage in non-suicidal self-injury are at a higher risk for suicide. So if you could help us understand, is self-harm connected to suicide? What is happening in our body? What causes such distress to people?
So you asked me about 2 to 3 questions. I will first take up mental health versus mental illness. What is mental health and what is the difference between mental health and mental illness? Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make healthy choices. Mental health is a part of everyone's life. It can be negative or positive. When we talk of mental health, we are referring to feelings and emotions like feeling sad, unhappy, disappointed, frustrated. Now, when we go to mental illness, it is a health problem that affects people's thoughts, moods, and behavior patterns. And they see and perceive the world around them very differently. Mental illness causes distress and may affect people's ability to function at work, in relationships, or in everyday tasks. It can range from mild disorder, just a few weeks of that disorder, to severe disorder, which can be like a lifelong disability for them. Anyone can develop mental illness. So this is the first part of your question. Am I
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. Thank you.
Now we go to self-harm and suicide.
Mhm.
So self-harm communicates distress and relieves tension. It is typically a coping strategy for preserving life and not ending it, trying to say, I need somebody's help. I'm hurting. Hear me. I want help. I'm shouting for help. And suicide comes from a place of despair, hopelessness, helplessness, worthlessness, unbearable pain, and cannot see any way out of there.
So you're saying that not all suicides are a result of mental illness, right?
No. Suicide, of course, is suicide. Sorry, what did you say?
Not all suicide are a result of mental illness. Is that correct?
Yes. You don't have, the person doesn't have to be mentally ill to,
To want to kill themselves.
Want to kill themselves, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you. And you were talking about the connection between self-harm and suicide. Would you like to help us understand that a little bit? Is there a connection?
So, yes. So there is a connection, but see, the non-suicidal self-injury disorder, the NSSID, that is, it's a deliberate action of causing physical harm to oneself, and it's a dangerous sign. Adolescents are at risk. Now, the 15% of school, like teenagers, and 17% of college-going students are at risk. And see, why would one
look like, Nishmin? What does it look like? What does self-harm look like?
what does self-harm look like?
Yeah.
It's actually something, it's shouting for some sort of attention that
No, I
I
meant,
need.
is it only, I have heard of, cutting
Yes, yes.
oneself deliberately. So
Oh,
are there
yes,
other
yes.
forms,
Yeah,
other,
yes,
other
of
ways
course.
in people
So,
self-harm?
yes, yes. Cutting themselves, beating themselves, hitting their head against the walls, deep scratching, piercing things, pulling their hair out. And the more potent ones are ingesting toxic chemicals
Mm.
and, deep piercing and hitting and
Yeah.
deep scratching and all of those things.
So what you're telling me is at one end of the spectrum actually of self-harm, where it is very, very grave, right?
Yeah.
And I'm looking at that also as a spectrum, because I believe that even what we consider normal, like smoking or drinking, are also forms of self-harm. So is that medically considered as, I mean, do people people in the profession take that as self-harm, or is it
No.
not considered self-harm?
No, it isn't considered self-harm. They know what they're doing. They know when a person is, in the self-harm mode, they feel a lot of emptiness and a lot of numbness. So when they are doing the act, they feel,
It is in desperation that they're doing the act.
yeah, they are doing it. But when they're doing it, like they burn themselves with cigarette butts and things like that, they feel alive, that, okay, I am still alive. It's not that I'm, that numbness, that emptiness is kind of
Okay,
pronounced.
so there are two
that-
things. There are two things I understand from what you're saying. One is that when I self-harm, when I hurt myself, there may be two reasons that I do it. One is because I don't feel anything at all otherwise. I'm so numb, I don't feel anything at all. I'm at least feeling this, is
Yes,
one thing.
yes,
And the
that
other
I'm
is that the
alive.
hurt is so much and I'm not able to control it. And this is something that I can control at least.
Yes.
Is
yes,
that,
yes,
have I
yes.
understood that correctly?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there are some pauses. Why was, okay, do you want me to say why, what are the pauses?
Yes,
Or
can we
later?
come back? Can
Yes,
we come
yes,
back to
yes,
that in a
yes,
minute?
sure,
Thank you so
sure,
much,
sure.
Nishmin. I just want to ask Rohit something. Rohit, given that you must have had so many people, right, in the various roles and organizations who have people have emotional issues. So given your experience, especially in these troubled times, with the recent 2-3 years of COVID and all that, have you found that there is an impact on organizational, work, the work at organization, on the culture? Have you seen instances of self-harm, suicidal behavior, depression to that extent? Could you talk about this a little bit, and possibly what are the trends you have seen in the last few years?
So Devika, thank you for the question, and it's an interesting question. It forms a bedrock of basically mental health in the organization, and any organization is a microcosm of the society. So it's not insulated from the aspects of what we see as mental health issues. What we see typically is that when a person is getting into that kind of a space, wherein from having a normal, happy, okay, not everybody is always happy, but you have a range of emotions which people demonstrate on a day-to-day work. But then you see them drifting apart over a period of 15 days to a month. You see that the person is not accompanying everybody else for lunch, for example. Or the person is starting to not interact with everybody at the same level. Or if the person is starting to distance themselves from the rest of the group, or if the performance seems to be dipping, they seem to be losing focus, and they seem to be in their own thoughts. These things typically in an organization where you've got reasonably good supervisors get caught out.
So it's important for supervisors to be in touch with their teams.
Absolutely. Instances of absenteeism go up, so people don't turn up for work, and sometimes You call up their family, no, he's left for work. So he's somewhere, the person has left from home to go to work and not reached to work, and somewhere they've somewhere else. So some of these things typically get caught. And then you get into some kind of a discussion with these people to say what's happening, because see, it also depends upon the kind of industry. So say, for example,
Yes.
somebody is a salesperson, right? And the person is lost when they are driving on the road going for some sales work. That's very risky, not just for themselves, but also for other people on the road.
Yeah. So
If
have you
there
seen a
is-
rise have you seen a rise in depression and low moods in the last few years, Rohit, after the pandemic and
I'll
the
come
impact
to
of
that. I'll come to that, Devika. But I think more importantly, I just want to also talk about that. When people get into that space of being lost, if they're in a manufacturing setup, they're also risking themselves as well as others by mishandling moving parts, moving machineries, and then
not being
accidents
able to
happen.
focus, concentrate, those
Absolutely.
behaviors.
So the role of supervisors there becomes very important to say who's drifting, who's not drifting, and to be able to trigger the right discussions with the employee, and be able to then alert the organization, sometimes the family of the employee, saying that something's not right, why don't you look at it? And we see that there could be, and earlier, so now I'm coming to that last 3 years, earlier the issues used to be largely around financial indiscipline. So you've taken too many loans and now you're not able to pay them off. You've taken loans not from banks, but from some local, they used to call them pathans and stuff like that, and they are harassing you, so you're scared to get out of your house. So that used to cause a lot of stress, or there would be relationship issues and illicit relationships, and families come to know and stuff like that. Societal pressure. So that's the kind of issues that used to come earlier. Now what we are seeing is two kinds of issues, which is very, very different, which I have not seen before in my working career. Is during COVID, a lot of people got stuck into very different situations with no place to let off steam. Right? So which means that, and I use this very apt thing, it resonates very well. Everybody is in the same storm, but everybody has a different boat. The storm was the same, the situation was the same, the circumstances were the same, but everybody had very, very different circumstances in their homes or in their own personal lives. Some people were staying with parents and or with in-laws, and that caused a very different kind of a stress. There were people who were staying in different cities from their parents at a very different kind of a stress. I could visit my parents whenever I wanted. Now I can't go. So there's a very different kind of a stress. Both husband and wife are working, and then kids are working in a small space. Everybody on the calls at the same time, trying to pick up what is happening, schools, work. A lot of stress. The work time earlier used to be, okay, fine, you leave home, you reach office, you work for some time, whatever time, you come back. So there was a space where you could say, this is my work time, this is my office time, this is my home time, this is me time.
Then it's all blurred now.
Diffused, right? So some of these things, people have not been able to cope up with it well. And that has caused a lot of
and both sides, right? I mean, if supervisors are not able to draw those lines properly, people see the supervisors as organizations. So then they say that our organization is not supportive.
Not only that, see, if supervisor interacts with you daily, they would pick up. Supervisors are also going through the same stress, and they're not meeting you. You're meeting people on a Teams call or on a Zoom call. Half the time, people's cameras are switched off. You don't know what's happening. You get the work, then you move on. You get the work, then you move on. And that is where the whole dissonance happened. That is where the whole aspect which led to the great resignation and stuff like that. I think this was a big key player in that. The other aspect which we are seeing in organizations these days, Devika and everybody else, is about youngsters having a social media addiction and having a very different self-concept in the social media space, and being very different.
That's a really good point.
And
not just youngsters. I think the impact of social media is on everybody really.
I'm just sharing from what I see, right? The people, I mean, all of us are on social media in some way or another, but we have a bit of a discipline in terms of how much time we spend there, number one, plus how much of my ego and my reason to exist depends upon what's happened on social media, right? I still have friends who would still call me up, we would talk, but for a lot of youngsters, the whole social life is on social media.
Yeah. So
Otherwise,
I have an opinion on that. Yeah, that our generation probably grew up in a time when we didn't have it, right? So our self-concept was not built on that. But youngsters now, their whole lives, they've known. I mean, social media has been part of their lives from a very young age.
So that is causing a lot of dissonance when that bubble bursts and the real life hits you. And
Agree
real
with
life
you.
hits everyone. Nobody is isolated from the vagaries of life. When life hits you, then the whole shiny,
I'll
high achiever
actually
life.
come back to you, Rohit, because I understand that your organization does support many of its people with helping them to build up mental resilience and empathy. So I'll come back to you with that. There's a question from somebody in the audience asking, can depression be one cause for self-harm and ultimately lead to suicidal behavior? And I think we did talk about that, where yes, it can. I mean, I'm hoping that those of you in the audience have not experienced such depths of depression that there is just complete hopelessness and helplessness. But when you reach that stage, yes, there is a stage where one comes to a stage of maybe I'm better off not living, and that's when really people think of ending their lives. Some statistics for you guys. So when we said that not all suicides are a result of mental illness, the WHO and the NCRB, the National Crime Report Bureau, they've said that in a total of 164,000 suicides were reported in the country in 2021, increased by about 7% or so from the previous year in terms of total numbers. Yeah, that's a lot, right? Out of these, about 13,000 of them were students. A lot of, why are we going to the National Crime Report? Because suicides had been reported as crimes before. Yeah, no longer, but they're still part of the National Crime Report. So just for the information of people who are listening in, we don't say commit suicide anymore. Yeah, because it is not a crime. You don't use the word commit anymore, just from a vocabulary point of view. Yeah. So having said that, not all suicides are a result of mental illness. What could be the other reasons? And Rohit was talking about, how in organizations it could be various signs that you could catch. Now, some of these are just social causes, right? You have family problems, you have relationship issues, you have financial issues, you have social acceptance problems, you have failure at various things. You have now, gender identity, sexual identity, a lack of being accepted for who you are. All of these things can make you feel like, nobody cares for me. And what am I doing in this world? Yeah. So untreated mental illness actually contributes to only about half of the suicidal deaths in the family, in the country. Yeah. Much of the other reasons of concern are social. So Nishman, if I can come back to you, how would you suggest that we as lay people, obviously we are not mental health professionals, but as lay people, how can we identify signs of suicidal thoughts? What can we do as lay people? How would we know?
So the red flags that we see, the warning signs, a sudden change in behavior. They get withdrawn, they get moody, they get irritable. As Rohit was saying, that these signs of not showing up, not, change in sleeping habits, change in eating habits. Either they're sleeping all the time or they're just lying awake in bed, not able to sleep at all.
Okay, so it's really important for there to be one self-awareness or there to be somebody close to them who notices these.
Yes, and it is very, very important to catch on these red flags, these warning signs. Also, their appearance, they are not bothered about, combing their hair or going for a bath. They're just not bothered.
Don't have the
About their-
energy to do it.
Yeah, a lot of lethargy, wanting to be isolated, wanting not to have any social connections, just wanting to stay in their room. And, some of them even making final arrangements, finishing their incomplete work, sometimes making a will, saying things like, I wish I were dead. Let's see what happens after I'm gone. So these are certain red flags that one catches on. And
Okay, so
yeah.
does it build up like this, or can somebody just decide on the spot to
no, it's a gradual buildup. It's a gradual buildup. So there is that thought is always there. Something is playing.
So is it okay to ask, Nishmin?
It is
Is it
very,
okay
very
to ask?
important. It is extremely important to ask the suicidal question, because there is a lot of stigma attached to this asking of this question, because we deal with so many.
So that word suicide doesn't come out of our mouths, no, in regular conversations.
But it is the most important question when a caller comes to our center and we as befrienders are talking to them. It is the most important thing to ask this suicidal question. Are you suicidal? And it is
suicidal. Are you thinking of killing yourself?
Yes,
Are you
yes,
thinking of suicide?
yes.
These are
You can
questions
say
to
it in different ways, but yes, you must ask. And the thing is that when we go to schools and we say that we are from a suicide prevention center, they say, oh, let's change the name, don't call yourself suicide prevention center. But it is very important. Why are we hiding from the word suicide? Why are we making it such a stigma? And why are we so afraid of talking about it? Let us talk about it and not make it such a hush topic.
So if you ask and I say yes, what would you do about it? As a layperson, what would you do?
So there are degrees of suicide. So there is, like, first it is just the thought. So we ask, okay, is it just a thought or have you attempted? So there are 4 stages. First, just the thought, then tried or attempted, then comes attempted a number of times, and severely suicidal. So there are these 4 kind of degrees, and we then evaluate what the urgency is. If it is severely, if the person is severely...
Nishmin, I mean, if I have a thought of suicide, it is an emergency regardless of whether it's once is enough, right?
No. So see, a lot of people come just for emotional support. So when they come to our center...
How do you differentiate then that, whether I'm going to kill myself or I just want emotional support?
If a person wants to die by suicide, they will just go and do the act. Here, when a person comes to our center, it is more like a cry for help. Hear me out. I need somebody to hear what I'm going through. I'm going through a lot of pain. I'm very lonely. I don't have anyone to hear me. Please listen to me. And all that we do at SAAT is to listen to that person. And once it can be an hour, it can be 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, till the person wents out completely. We just hear the person. And you won't believe it, but once he has vented out everything, he will say, I'm so thankful. I just needed to talk to somebody, another human being. at least you heard me out. At least there is somebody who will hear and listen to what I have to say.
So I
it-
think Rucha in the audience has asked this question: how do we initiate a conversation with a close friend when we are seeing the signs of depression or self-harm? I think Rucha, this answers that. I mean, if you are able to spend that time with that friend, and there is enough trust and openness, and you're able to help them to speak about it. From what Nishman says, that is 50% of the battle.
See, be a active listener. We listen, but we're listening without really putting thought to it. But be an active listener. Listen with all your, concentration, that the person feels as if somebody has heard him out. So that is very important.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And, Rohit, sorry, there are a couple of questions that I think would have a bearing to the corporate world. Yeah. One is how do you bring the practice of counseling at offices, and how do you break the stigma or make employees visit counseling at offices? One of the questions that has come from the audience. So is there something that you all do actively to get employees to be able to visit your EAPs and the counselors at work? Rohit, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm saying most large companies these days have got tie-ups with various EAPs. EAPs are employee assistance programs. These are helplines with trained counselors who sit and they provide whatever necessary help in terms of listening to people, trained people sitting on the lines and listening to people. After listening to people, they also refer them to various counselors, etc. And they are done in a manner that no information comes back to the organization unless it's a very serious suicide case. And there also they check with them that they should tell a family or anybody else or the organization. So the first step to breaking that barrier of people reaching out to this is to be able to tell people that there is such a facility available. It is free of cost, and that it is confidential. The where it gets a beating is people don't believe that it is confidential. People somewhere believe that they will tell us, but one call will go to HR person and say that so-and-so person reached out and the person seems to have a problem. To build that confidence in the teams and to the employees is extremely important. So it is important that we communicate about it, we give that confidence. There are posters available in various places. It comes up as a computer pop-up when you put on your computer screen. It's built into the town hall communication from time to time.
So do leaders have a role to play in this, Rohit? What is the leader's role in this in terms of reducing stigma about counseling, about going to,
So leaders have a role to play in everything. Leaders decide the direction in which the organization goes. What is there on leaders' radar, it gets on everybody's radar. So it is very important to put in on leaders' radar. Now, when you're having a strategy discussion, you can't talk about EAP as a part of that. But there are a lot of town halls wherein you talk about wellness, you talk about health. So we celebrate Women's Day, for example, or Women's Month now we celebrate. Or you want to celebrate.
No, I meant more in terms of would it help? I was just thinking that if I was a team member, I would be more likely to go to the counselor if I knew my manager was also going to the counselor. It's not just me. It's even if he's able to go, then I can also go. That sort of thing. So is that encouraged?
See, we keep it confidential. So even if the boss is going to the counselor, he or she wouldn't talk about it. And that is how
so
it
that
is.
is where the stigma comes, right? When we don't talk about it, is where the stigma comes.
See, there are a few fields which work very well. Now, as I said, the bosses also come from the society. So you can't necessarily say that whether it is a stigma or not a stigma, you really don't know what's the kind of issue or the severity of the issue people are struggling with. Right? So I would say that yes, there is a stigma to it, but I would still in an organization not encourage people to say, hey, I went there and this happened and All that
Mhm.
because there are privacy laws that come into place. Specifically in global organizations, these issues are treated as very, very serious
Mm.
privacy matters. So you can't talk about it openly. So we don't get into that space of encouraging people to say, hey, I went and this happened and that happened. It's completely kept under the wraps to, for example, you don't share medical records with people, irrespective
Mm.
of what kind of medical records they have.
Yes.
It comes in the same
Yeah.
space of confidentiality. And when you don't do it is when you build confidentiality. If I go around telling that I went and so and so went and so and so went, then if there is a stigma in my mind, I won't go.
Yeah, but there are two schools of thought about this. No, one is confidentiality, that what I talk there will not be discussed outside by the counselor or by the company. But the other school of thought is also that if I talk about it more normally, like I would talk about my diabetes or my, like any other illness, then it encourages other people also to, it's the Me Too thing, right? That it encourages other people also to talk about their own vulnerabilities. So that was where I was coming from.
I think we have to also talk about these things in the context of the in context of the society we live in. I think we're quite far away from there.
Oh,
And
dear.
I'm being very practical about it. So if you
Yeah.
tell me that why don't you encourage people who've gone there, I don't know who they are. Right? I'm not supposed to know and I don't know. And if somebody talks about it, it will be good. It will be a good, positive, mature step forward.
So
But
that's
I
where
think
we need, that's our goal, right? To reach a stage of culture where it is okay to talk about it.
But Devika, can I put in something?
Yes, please.
It should actually start right from the school.
Uh-huh.
Actually, in the curriculum, add something like what is mental health?
Mm.
So it doesn't become like, how can we talk about it? When the children go home and talk to their parents, that today we had a class on this,
Yeah.
and the teacher made us understand.
Yes.
The parents will also start opening up.
Yes.
They see certain things in the house. They see their parents fighting. They
No,
see so many
absolutely.
things.
This is something we
So-
should be taught in school.
It should be taught in school, and it should not be such a hush thing. It should be open conversation on the dining table, that today I was not feeling all right and I went to the counselor, or the mother is telling the father in front of the child that somehow I'm not okay, but that's fine. It's okay. Sometimes I will also feel low, but I'll be back. My mood will be fine. So these are things which should be very normalized. It should not be stigmatized.
So given this, Nishmin, then, I've seen people who have had like really disastrous things happen to them, but they continue to have such positive attitudes, and they become inspiration to others and all that. So what are they doing differently? How come some people bounce back and some people just burn out? And some people, take this extreme step?
See, it is their the one main thing is their coping skill. If they have
coping skills, okay.
The coping skills are actually the main thing. If you have good coping skills, you can
So tell me
slowly
some
come out
good
of
coping
anything.
skills. What could be good coping skills that we, can, maybe we already have them and we're not aware, but if we're not, then perhaps we can develop, better coping skills. So if you could just name a
No,
few.
so if someone is feeling distressed or something, okay, start exercising, start, doing pranayam, do a little bit of meditation, breathing, all those things. Go see a counselor, take help, have a support, social support.
So friends and family, is it?
Friends and family.
Okay.
And so these are some of the things that they can do. There are so many other things which, reach out to a professional if there is something even major than that, So try and make your life worth living more than there have been, as you say, very, very inspirational cases where people have been completely finished and have risen up in such a strong way with their positive attitude and the will to live.
So again, a question of why is it different for them? Is it that their brains are wired differently? Are we, can we retrain our brains to?
Yeah, why not? We can rewire our brains, and it is more of what you feel, whether you are positive from within or whether it is the society and the things that are bogging you down.
Okay. So one clarification here, I think what we're talking about, just for the audience, one clarification is that these coping mechanisms and all are more for when you're feeling low because of social causes. Yeah, because of things that are happening to you, your environment, your relationships, etc. If there is a mental illness, if you are in depression, clinical depression, and that is driving you to suicidal thoughts, that's an entirely different matter.
Absolutely.
There you need a
Things.
psychiatrist,
Yes,
you need medication, you need therapy. So these are all things that so it is very important when somebody is talking about suicide, or whether you have when you ask that question, right, that Nishman said, of are you feeling suicidal? Are you having thoughts of suicide? And if the answer is yes there, it's very important to take it seriously and get the person to see a psychiatrist.
Yes.
First, to determine, is this because of an illness, or is this because of social pressures?
No,
because then the way you deal with it is very different.
Yes, yes. They would need medication also.
Yes.
They would need medication, and this is a completely different thing.
So just to share, I unfortunately was hit by a bout of depression about 6 months ago. And I can tell you, I didn't want to get out of bed. Okay, so I didn't want to do it, couldn't make decisions, couldn't decide what to make for lunch. Just, silly everyday things, I couldn't function. So I'm just thinking, if that is how one feels, and I had a very mild case. So in deep clinical depression, I never want to feel that way. It's a terrible feeling. So the question here is, when one is clinically depressed and doesn't have the energy to act upon thoughts of suicide, I've heard that once they get a little better and have a little more energy, if the thoughts are still there, that's when you have the energy to actually act it out. Right? So what advice would you have then for people in that situation, for people who are supporting people in that situation?
Advice for the people who are supporting?
The support system. So if I have a friend who's been through medication and is coming out of it, but those suicidal thoughts would still be there.
Yeah, so see, the suicidal thoughts, suppose somebody has this suicidal thought or has attempted this, it is a 3-month period that they say, that thought still, if he has tried, it lingers. So it's not that once he has tried or she has tried and it's over, he's,
got over it. Yeah.
Got over it. That means now it's over and done with. No, that thought will linger for 3 months. So you have to be careful. You have to have a support. The friends and family have to support him, be with him or her, and encourage that person to be very normal. Don't, people say, oh, just snap out of it. Now, what's the big deal? Oh, other people have it much worse than you. Don't say these things. These are very insensitive things to say. That, let's go for a ride and you'll feel better. You'll just start feeling absolutely normal. Just forget about it. These are very, very insensitive things. You have to be sensitive during that time.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that's important for us to know. We were talking about EAP support systems earlier, right? For organizations, and that most people don't reach out to them for whatever reasons. One of the reasons that I've read about is that they don't recognize their own distress as signs of poor mental health. They feel that, I at least have felt that way, that these are things I can cope with on my own. What will people think? So I feel that lack of information and this social stigma are the biggest hurdles. And I think some of the ways that we can address them is through awareness programs. So just basic education on mental health, like you were saying, no, we should have learned this in school. But the other more deep-rooted thing, and that, where we need to destigmatize is by normalizing conversations, right? So do you think, I mean, are these conversations what we lay people can have? Does one need training to have these conversations? Or what do you think? I mean, are there people who are trained in your organization, Rohit, or do you think you need people who are trained?
You need people who are trained. I mean, this is not something that can be done insensitively or not done properly. And that is why we tell leaders that if you pick up something, let us know, and then we would encourage people to go to the EAP directly.
I see.
And then we follow up and say, hey, I hope you went there. And then, but we monitor their behavior a lot more closely to say that, do you see an upside or is it continuing? And different companies have different ways to handle it. There are companies where supervisors and employees are extremely close to each other, specifically in manufacturing setup. They work very, very closely, and the supervisor would know their family. So in that case, they go and check out and take one step further.
Yeah.
Or the HR and the supervisor would go and do it. But in a lot of global
companies, there's
that.
good culture. Cultural practices are good then, right? By demonstrating commitment and
between the people. But that is going in the post-COVID era when people are all working virtually and there's a significant churn in the organizations. The relationships are becoming a lot more transactional. I
think that one of the structural supports possibly that organizations would need to think about investing in is training people in mental health, in that first aider role, where you can confidently have these conversations, right? And identify early stage identification really, and encourage people to seek help. Those are the conversations really that a first aider has.
We wouldn't encourage people to counsel employees because they could take them completely the other way around.
No. Counseling, I think a mental health professional should do. But in order to reach the counselor, there's a big gap, right? So the first aider sort of encourages people identifies people in distress and encourages them to seek help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, so maybe if we could, spend a few minutes on talking about, what are the sort of coping mechanisms, perhaps that y'all can encourage in organizations itself. Are they positive? Are they negative coping mechanisms? I would think that, just coming into work is not enough, right? I can burn out by working long hours also. So is that a coping mechanism also?
Absolutely.
So if you can just tell us a few coping mechanisms that you see as positive and negative, perhaps it would help us to also, sort it in our heads.
So various coping mechanisms exist. I think some of them is asking people to go on leave, first of all, take a break. Sit back, relax, think. So when we do, say, for example, annual appraisals, one of the data points available to managers in countries where it is not considered as private personal information, it is made available to the manager. And if an employee is not taking enough leave through the year, the manager actually has a conversation, hey, everything is fine, but you should take more leaves, right? So we encourage that behavior so that people take a break, they break the monotony and they kind of...
So actually having the relationship and the conversations is very important, right?
That is the bedrock. But apart from that, data is also important. So if I'm not taking leaves, that basically says that I'm not taking a break, I'm not rejuvenating, I'm not recharging my battery. So we encourage people to take breaks, and that data is available. And irrespective if I have a new person or I am new and with handling a new team, but if I see the data, I can still tell the person, you've taken only 3 leaves in the whole year, this is not acceptable. Take at least 15 days and I will support.
Yeah.
Right? So basically, supporting people with leaves is one. Sometimes you are able to help people by changing their teams, changing their bosses, So basically break the monotony. You see something is not right. One is you encourage the person to go to the EAP, but the second thing is also you try break the monotony, change the shift timing, change the location. A lot of times we see that people have stress because they're working in a place away from their families and they're not able to manage staying alone, specifically after they're married or stuff like that. And large organizations have the wherewithal to move them closer to where their families are, because for various reasons they can't. So you don't know what are the reasons for stress people come through. But if you can address it as a large organization with a wherewithal, organizations nowadays are a lot more open to doing things like that to help employees have a better work-life balance and to have a better. And there's a lot of discussion around wellness these days in organization. I mean,
around illness, is it?
Wellness. So, and
Right.
wellness is about not just health, which people typically. Wellness is about mental, physical, emotional, financial.
That's true.
It
Rohit,
encompasses everything.
That's at a very basic level. But when we're talking about suicide and we're talking about self-harm, when unfortunately, I've realized that many young people, and these are the young people that are coming into the workforce, right? Many young people are resorting to self-harm as a coping mechanism. And very often we don't know about it. Parents don't know about it. Their friends don't know about it, because very often the kind of self-harm they do are in ways or places that are not visible, right? So it could be by, cutting myself in places where my clothing is covering it, or, even eating disorders also, right? I can harm myself by eating junk, really, when I know it's not good. These are the people that are coming into the workforce, right? So, and I don't think our organizations are prepared in any way to deal with it, right? So, I think there are multiple factors here. One, us as people who are distressed and resorting to self-harm, us as people with friends and colleagues who are doing this, us as parents whose children are doing this, us as managers of organizations where we have employees coming in with such distress. So I'm just putting it out there. I have no solutions to this. I'm just putting it out there. And, if we could have just 2-3 points from both of you on.
But I really feel that this is a whole generation of wanting things, like a gratification right there and then. No tolerance for anything. It is, everything is laid out. The parents have laid out so much for them.
Yeah, and that's a bit of a judgment though, no, Nishmin, because we are, the parental generation is the one that is providing access to all this.
Yes, but then they do. That is the thing, that it's so easily available. And there is no, when I'm speaking to a few of these students that I speak with, I say, are you grateful for anything? And they are wondering, what can I be grateful for? They have everything. They are studying in one of the best universities in Ahmedabad, and they still.
So I'm taking away, Nishmin, from that. Sorry to interrupt. I'm taking away gratitude.
Yeah.
Building a culture of gratitude, or a practice of gratitude as being something positive that one can use as a coping mechanism if you do it regularly enough, right?
Yes,
to bolster.
Yes. Okay. And they are so into themselves, and the whole thing.
We are all into ourselves, Nishmin. Social media has done this to us, unfortunately.
But
we're also worried about what other people will think about us.
I know, and there's so much of comparison that this guy's got this.
So this is a big comparison, is a big reason, I think, for people's low self-esteem.
I think Instagram is the most, it can be good and bad both, because the people who post things on Instagram, they come for counseling and say, I'm feeling awful. I'm feeling the pits, and people are trying to follow them and saying, I want to be like her,
Feel
or I
like them.
want to
So
be
it's a
like.
mask. These
So
are
it's
masking.
really a big mask that we are wearing, all of us,
So-
not only them.
I think we're out of time. This is really not a topic to be discussed for an hour. I think we need half a day for this. If people are willing to stay on for another few minutes, if there are any questions you'd like to ask, please do ask now. And while you're putting in your questions, if you have any that we have not addressed yet, let me take the opportunity to thank our panelists. And Rohit, thank you so much for taking time out of your day for this. And
It's an
Nishmin,
absolute pleasure
thank
to-
you for bringing your experience to the table and
Thank you
helping
very
us
much for having me.
understand a little bit about this scary topic. It is a scary topic, right? Because it can happen to anybody. It can happen to anybody we know. It can happen to me. And I really want to know, how I can identify signs and how I can take steps to address it. So
Good evening, everybody. Sorry to interrupt, Devika. I have
Yes,
a question which was not answered. I've put it in the chat box also. So this is to Mr. Rohit. Hi, Rohit.
Hi.
With the size of organizations that we have these days, be it small or big, and the kind of race that every employee of the organization tries to reach their targets, is there enough time for people to identify that the other person or the colleague or a friend is undergoing the traumatic stigma or emotional imbalance? And
I think stigma is a wrong word. I don't think there's trauma. Stigma is this inside out and outside, and so we will separate it out. But I can promise you, in well-knit teams where people work together, if there is a behavioral shift, if there is somebody who's going through stress which is impacting behavior, it gets caught out. We are social beings. We know each other reasonably well. It gets caught out. In post-COVID world, it is difficult because people are not really meeting each other. Half the times the cameras are off. You really don't know what's happening. But otherwise, you would pick it up. The person is suddenly stopped shaving for men or for women. You see that, earlier the person used to be dressed quite nicely. Now the person not really taking care. If you are aware of how people behave normally at one period, and if they are behaving differently, which is not as good, people will know. I mean, if people are in love, you will wake out, right? You still pick up positive signals also. No? You pick up what's happening, something's nice, and I see you dress up very nicely.
Yeah.
Because people pick up the other thing also. They don't talk as much about it. You see
I
positive
think,
things, you talk about it. You see negative
Srividya,
things.
I think also, Rohit is one fortunate enough to work in organizations that have cultures like this, and two has been instrumental in building cultures like this in organizations. So the point, I think, is it is up to individuals to make the time. It's up to organizations to encourage such cultures within their, within the, and again, it is top down. So if my boss doesn't permit me to talk to the person next to me and have a chat and have a coffee break and all, then that's also part of the culture. So, it is very individual and organizational, I feel, permitting such things to happen. All
Thank you
said
so
and done,
much.
everybody brings baggage to their work. Yeah, nobody leaves emotional baggage at the door when they walk in. All of us bring our whole self with us, right? And then it'll come out in some way. Do we notice that it is coming out in some way is the thing. And if you're working remotely, even more difficult to suss it out. Yeah. I hope that answered your question, Srividya, between Rohit and.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay, out of time. We're 4 minutes out of time. Thank you so much, Nishmin. Thank you, Rohit.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
thanks,
for having me.
audience, for your questions and making this interesting for everybody. We will, I think, I've realized that this is not enough time. So we will have more such sessions with a little more time, perhaps. Yeah. So
Thank you.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you.